Well, good evening and welcome to this meeting of the Corporate Policy Development Committee. My name is Councillor George Courtauld and I am the chairman of this committee. I will now go through a few items of housekeeping before we proceed with the main business of the meeting. We're not expecting a fire alarm this evening, but should one sound, please can members use the exit to the rear of the chamber and assemble in the car park. Please can you make sure that your phones and devices are switched to silent. If members wish to speak during our debates this evening, please can you indicate by raising your hand and I will come to you at the appropriate time. Please can I remind everyone to use their microphones when speaking and to switch them off when they've finished speaking. And I also remind you that this meeting is being webcasted. I will now proceed with the main business of the meeting. Agenda item 1, apologies for absence. We have received apologies from the following members. Councillor Toby Williams. Councillor James Bond may be delayed in attending. He is travelling from Milton Keynes. And Councillor Paul Thorogood. Are there any further apologies?
I can confirm there are no other apologies, thanks, Chairman.
If there are no further apologies, I will proceed with agenda item 2, declarations of interest. Do members have any disclosable pecuniary interest, other pecuniary interest, or non-pecuniary interest that they wish to declare this evening? Please state the item and the nature of your interest. If there are no declarations, I will proceed to item 3, minutes of the previous meeting. Members, you may have noticed that there is an error on the agenda regarding the date of the last set of minutes. However, the minutes themselves are correctly dated. Please can I have a proposer to approve the minutes as an accurate record of the meeting of the Corporate Policy Development Committee held on the 26th of July 2023. Anyone would like to propose that?
I propose.
Oh, thank you, Councillor Finken. And I now seek a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Jeffries. The minutes have been moved and seconded as an accurate record. All those in favour, please indicate by a show of hands. All those against, please indicate by a show of hands, as I think you all were in favour. Ignore that. The minutes are approved, and I sign them now, don't I? Agenda item 4, public question time. Members, we have no registered speakers for this evening's meeting, so I will proceed to the next item of business, which is agenda item 5, Corporate Strategy 2024/28, Development. Members, the report before you this evening is set out on pages 5 to 7 of the agenda. I would like to welcome Tracy Headford, Business Solutions Manager, who will be our lead officer for this item this evening and will be providing us with a presentation with an overview of the development of the corporate strategy, including a timeline detailing the process through to its publication. We also have Dan Gascoigne, Chief Executive Officer, in attendance. Welcome to you both. Tracy, unless you have any questions first, I would like to invite you to begin with your presentation. Members, we will take questions at the end of the presentation. Thank you, Tracy. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. Okay, so I'm going to take you through a presentation, just sort of give you a little bit of background as to why we have corporate strategy. I'll take you through some of the, how we sort of like develop it, looking at the research that we look at, the evidence base. I'm going to take you through some headline results of the recent consultation that we had, and then we'll go through the timeline. So, in developing our corporate strategy for the next 4 years, first thing I'll say is having a corporate strategy in the public sector is just as important as having one in the private sector. We need to be able to plan for our future direction, and we need to sort of like, when we're doing that, we need to consider all of our budget priorities. We need to be able to look at what resources we have available to deliver our priorities and how we're going to meet the needs and expectations of everyone whilst considering sort of like the environmental conditions and economic conditions. So when we're looking at our strategy, we want us to help us think what we want to do to sort of, or what we want to do to achieve it. It can be as simple as asking, where are we? Where do we want to be, by 2028 and beyond, and then how will we get there? but the world's changed quite recently. It's not as predictable, it's not as stable. We've got a lot more volatility, and we're now used to changes coming out of nowhere, having a huge impact. So we also need to consider the why, what and how when we're developing this. So firstly, we have a look at why we're here. So as an organisation, we're here because we need to make a difference. We need to be able to keep moving, and it could be something just as simple as like we want to provide safe and healthy communities with access to quality homes and jobs. I'm not saying that's what our strapline is, I'm just giving you an example. We then need to look at the what. So, what do we want to do to achieve this? And this is where we then design what our priorities are going to be, or objectives as well. And then you've got the how. So how do we do this? That is actually what is going to define us as a council. That's how we run things, and ultimately how we're going to respond to our priorities, our threats and other changes, and continue to deliver what is important to our residents and our communities and our businesses. So when we develop our corporate strategy, we know that it's important to ensure that it focuses on the things that really matter. We can be clear about our priorities because we've done our research. We're having a look at our evidence bases, and as I said, I'm going to take you through a little bit of that. We also meet internally, so we had a managers conference last week where we got managers involved in the development of the corporate strategy, and we're also going to do stakeholder engagement as well. And we've also done other feedback or other engagement. So we have all of those discussions with the people that we need to help us understand the direction that we need to take and the decisions we need to make to get us there. Corporate strategy can be quite complex. It's not just a single level service plan. We have multiple services, we've got multiple perspectives, we've got multiple interests. So therefore we've got quite a lot of decisions that might need to be made in the face of uncertainty or ambiguity. Strategic management in local government, it does tend to be a little bit more complex than what it is in sort of like the private sector. We've got more than one level, we've got that multiple tiers, and we need to make sure that we're thinking through the wide range of policies that we have that sit elsewhere as well. And also we need to make sure we're taking our budgets into consideration as well. So far from it being a nice, neat, linear process, it's far from that. It's often shaped by unexpected events, political pressures, but we also need to make sure that we are accountable to those people that we're doing this for, and that is obviously the taxpayers. So it needs to be visible and it needs to be accountable more so in this sector than any other sectors. So when we develop our strategy, we need to make sure that we're clear about our goals and we know what our priorities are going to be. It's underpinned by sort of a good understanding of the changing environment in which the councils are operating. That could be like trends in government policy, the nature of the local economy, as I said, any opportunities and threats to services. It needs to be based on realistic understanding of what's actually possible. We can't sort of go out there and suddenly think, yes, we're going to do that, and then struggle to actually be able to achieve that. And it needs to be able to be developed with everybody that has a stake in the implementation of that strategy. So members, managers, staff, partner organisations, community groups, and where possible, so that we can meet our budgetary requirements, we need to be a little bit creative in how we design it and how we discover new possibilities and ways of working to actually sort of like achieve what we need to achieve. So moving on, I'm just going to take you through a little bit about the research and evidence base that we look at. We have a number of areas that help us to develop our corporate strategy. First one, sort of like we look at our district statistics. So we're quite lucky in the fact that we had the census in 2021. So we've got quite a lot of information now that we're able to draw upon around what the district looks like today. We've developed ward profiles as a respect of that, but we also have health profiles, economic profiles, housing profiles, crime stats, partner organisations, information. So we have a lot of statistics that can be thrown our way, and it's sort of like going through that and picking out what's important to us and sort of developing that and what's important to our partners as well. We're going to look at our existing and emerging plans. So we have a few that have just been recently refreshed, such as the healthy home strategy, the economic strategy, digital strategy, climate strategy. They're all going to be in place whilst we're going through our corporate strategy. We've always got our medium-term financial strategy, which is constantly being refreshed, and we're also looking at our homelessness strategy at the moment and a Live Well strategy, which are all going to feature in part of our corporate strategy. So we need to make sure we're taking the priorities of those strategies in consideration when we're developing our corporate strategy. We also need to look at our partnership plan. So a lot of work that we do in delivering our priorities is in partnership with either other organisations, it could be the voluntary sector, it could be just in with partnership with communities. So we need to understand what their objectives are, what their aims are, what they want to achieve, and make sure that we can align our strategy with that as well. We have, as I've mentioned earlier, sort of like statistical information that we get a lot of. So that's not just the district statistics. We also look at our own performance information as well. Best practice from other areas, we utilise benchmarking quite highly in respect of that and have a look at what good looks like in other organisations. And we can even look at our partners' performance as well, because if we're joining in with partners and we've got a priority that they're not maybe performing very well in, we may need to have a look at how we structure that. Obviously, we've got the national changes that we need to take into consideration. That could be around how new legislation is going to impact on how we deliver our services. We can also look at national consultations, national policy frameworks, strategies, conferences, research and studies, etc., all that goes on around sort of what's happening nationally, and that could impact on us. And then, quite importantly, is feedback. So we're going to be covering the corporate strategy consultation results a little bit later on in this presentation. But we also look at other satisfaction surveys that are carried out across the council. We've got the Essex Residents Survey, for example, that our partners look at. We've got complaints, we have compliments, we get business feedback, we get staff feedback, we have stakeholder feedback as part of this process. We have audits, and obviously we're going through a peer review at the moment, so that can hopefully feed into this process as well. So as I said earlier, the budget is also being developed alongside this process, and budget will also take into consideration quite a number of these areas when they're setting what they want to do. So I'm going to take you through some of our evidence base at the moment that we have. So this is mainly taken from sort of like the census, and it's going to just give you a brief outline of what the district looks like today. So this is our base, this is our starting point. So I'll just go through this quickly. I won't go through sort of like everything, but like most of the UK, we have got an ageing society. Our over 65s have increased by nearly 30% since 2011. So that now makes up over 20% of our population for our district. Only 66% of our households are connected to the gas mains. That's compared to 73% in Essex and 74% in England. And that kind of reflects that rural nature that we have within our district. We've got generally low levels of income deprivation, but 3 wards in our district are in the 20% of the most deprived areas in the country, and they are Bocking South, Braintree Central and Beccles Green, and then we've got House of Trinity and Bocking North, which are joint third on that list. So we need to make sure that, you know, we do have some quite deprived areas mixed in with some very affluent areas as well. And obviously, being quite rural in nature, travel is quite high on the agenda for some people. It can take quite a while to travel to either employment or services, and we've got quite high travel times in respect of that. So moving on, we're okay really for rough sleeping. We don't generally have too much of a rough sleeping issue. We've got very good, you know, comparisons to England, but that doesn't mean we need to be complacent. We are seeing a increase in our, I'm on the wrong slide, aren't I? No, yeah, that's right. So, yeah, we have seen quite a bit of an increase in people coming to us that are facing homelessness, so that need our interventions, whether we can prevent it or whether or not we need to sort of like help them, assess them and put them on our waiting list. So, as at the end of August, we've got 45 people in temporary accommodation across our district, and we've got 454 people still waiting to be assessed, and currently over 2,200 people on our waiting list, or on our housing list. We've also got quite a few empty properties in our district, over 1,000 of them, and they are considered as long-term empty, and that is an increase of 354 over the last 2 years. So that's on the increase as well. So we have got areas where we're working to sort of try and reduce that. And as at the end of June, we've got 157 Ukrainian guests in the district, and we're also expected to house 113 via the Asylum Dispersal Scheme. Health, we've got 44.4% of our residents say they're in bad or very bad health. That's slightly better than what the England rate is of 5.2. There is a significant difference between life expectancy. So I mentioned earlier about the least deprived wards. You can have up to 10 years for males and 8 years for females, the difference in their life expectancy depending on where you live in our district. We also have the 4th highest level of suicide, which I found quite alarming in Essex, and that's after Brentwood, Colchester and Tendring. So if you look at the size of those districts compared to ours, that's quite an alarming figure. And because of the rural nature, again, for residents to be able to access, doctors, hospitals, it could be up to 120 minutes for them to travel on public transport. And that's not because of how far away it is, that could be the infrequency of the public transport as well. Crime rates, we're not too bad. I say that, it has increased by 6.3% year on year between 2011 in the last 10 years. But our crime rates per population is lower than what it is for the England crime rate and the Essex crime rate. So we are still have low crime rate, and we are considered the 131st safest non-metropolitan district in Essex out of 181. But it's perception really of crime for people. So if they live in an area where they don't feel safe to go out at night, for them these stats don't really matter to them. Burglary is our most common type of crime, and that is the fastest type of crime anyway. Employment levels are quite high. We have very low unemployment in the district, so we are higher as well for our employment across UK and Essex. Saying that though, our gross weekly pay in the district is one of the lowest in Essex. In fact, it is the lowest in Essex. So we need to sort of like have a look at that. So probably a lot of our people are actually going outside of the district to look for work. We don't have very many large businesses. Chelmsford and Colchester both have 30 large businesses. We've only got 10. And 36.9% of our population district are economically inactive. So out of that, 64% of those are retired. The others could be student, or they could have disability that means that they can't actually work. And that compares to sort of like 38.7 in Essex and 39.1 in England. So slightly lower, but still areas that we need to sort of like look at. I will just say on that slide as well, the majority of our businesses in our district are small employers, so they employ less than 9 people. We do not, the large districts with 10, the 10 large employers that we have, that's where they'll be employing sort of like around sort of 250 mark. Majority of ours are small businesses, so less than 9 people. So national changes that we have a look at as well. These are ones that we have uncertain timings for, so we don't necessarily know when they're going to be brought in. There could be items that we've been waiting for quite some time, and we'd have been looking at when we were putting the last corporate strategy together. So fair funding review, we need to obviously understand what's going to be happening with regards to local government finance. We need to have a look, we know that's broken, we need to know what they're going to be doing about that. We know that there's an increase in scrutiny coming through Oflog, so we need to understand how we are reporting out on our performance and how we benchmark and look at responding to that increase in scrutiny. Changes to the waste system from the Environment Act, so that's something that we have been waiting for quite some time and continue to wait. And we've also got things like the biodiversity that's going to be coming in around that too. We've got changes to the planning as part of Levelling Up and also the Regeneration Act. But we also need to consider the pressures that are on our other partners as well around sort of like the NHS, the police, Essex County Council, etc. So a lot of them will have an impact as to how we can deliver out on our services. So that's basically giving you a little bit of a picture as to where we are now and the basis of where we start with our corporate strategy really. I'm going to take you through some of the consultation results now. So this consultation was a residents' consultation that we carried out on our corporate strategy. So we asked really what's important to them with regards to the place that they live and or work. And it then broke it down into sort of general themed areas. We wanted to know what was more important to them out of a selection of areas that they could pick from. And we then also, for this year, and this year we haven't done this before, we added in some financial questions as well so that we can help to sort of like shape our budget moving forward. So this slide just gives you a little bit of a breakdown as to the responses that we got. So we had 583 in total. The consultation ran from the 17th of July until the 1st of September, so there was a 7-week period for them to provide our responses. We had quite a lot of activity going on to promote this during that 7 weeks. We also asked for people to comment on what was most important to them and to give us a little bit of, so we could understand a little bit around their answers. We had over 3,500 comments to go through. And as you can see there, that's just giving you a little bit of a breakdown for that. So you can see that the majority of people that responded to the survey are over the age of 65. We have had a very low level response in our lower age groups, which is a little bit disappointing. We will look to see if we can increase some of that, and we did have, in our jobs fair that we had on Saturday, we had quite a few young people come in, so we have managed to boost that a little bit. We have another 8 responses that we can add to the younger age group there, but it does all help. But what you'll see when we go through this, because those bottom age groups are so low, we've had to sort of join them together with some of the other age groups to sort of make it statistically significant. So moving on, so this was the first question that we had, and they were asked to pick their top 5 areas on what makes a good place to live and or work, and you've got the top 5 there coming out. So access to health services is top, low levels of crime, well-maintained roads and pavements, access to parks and open spaces and thriving town centres is what is important to most people. As we said earlier, about crime rates are one of the lowest across sort of like comparison to Essex and England, but this is where the perception bit comes in because it's the second most important thing to people. So regardless of how low crime rates are, they still believe that crime needs to, be improved. I have just put in a few notes there. So what we do tend to do, and this you'll get this in a lot more detail next week at the members' evening, where we've got a members' evening next week on the corporate strategy. It'll be your opportunity to get involved in this, and we will be given a much more detailed feedback session on the results of this, and we'll take you through what some of the differences are in the ages and what's important in the ages. But there's just some noted here. So the over 65s obviously really important to them around access to health services and good public transport. The age groups, sort of like the 18 to 44s, for them, the top ones were access to parks and open spaces and activities for children and young people. In Witham, access to health services, parks and open spaces, children, people and young people, and local job prospects. Local job prospects, when we did this 4 years ago, rated quite highly in the younger people. That's dropped off quite significantly this time round. Now, obviously, that could have a lot to do with the way that with the new ways of working, the fact that we're now in a hybrid world. You don't need to necessarily live locally to work locally. You can work anywhere as long as you've got that good digital connection. So, we are seeing priorities change in our younger age groups. The older age groups, not so much. So we then sort of, as I said, broke it down into some thematic areas. So this one was asking what's important to them in respect of the environment. We gave them the areas to choose from and asked them to pick the 3 most important ones. Obviously, protecting the countryside, keeping the area clear of litter and having well-kept parks has come out top, closely followed by planting trees and letting some areas be wild. Interestingly, addressing the impact of climate change came low, that's at the bottom. But obviously, being able to address the impact of climate change is going to impact on a lot of these areas as well. So I think that it kind of goes hand in hand, and if we plant more trees, if we protect our countryside, that is going to address the impacts of climate change. So again, that could just be sort of how we sort of communicate to our residents around things like that. Again, just some notable differences across the age groups. The 65 plus range, they're more interested in reducing waste and recycling. For the 18 to 44s, kind of leads back into the previous one. They want their parks to be well kept so they can take their young children out and about. And looking at the sort of like the areas, Houston wanting to protect their countryside, and Witham, again, it's around reducing waste and recycling. So we then asked what's important in respect of your community. Linking back into the crime rates, feeling safe was top there with 88%, so that's come out a lot on top. And then it's about having a strong community to support vulnerable residents, and then being aware of local activities that people can get involved with. Again, notable differences across the age group is around sort of like having those strong communities to support the vulnerable residents and being aware of local community activities. So our lower age groups want to be able to get involved. The residents in the Braintree sort of want access to funding to support community projects and activities, and in Witham it's around for them about feeling safe within your community. And I don't know if any of you are aware of what's going on in Witham at the moment, but we do have a Safer Places working programme that's going on in that area. So that is an area that we have already identified from our evidence base that we're working through. So that is an area that we need to continue sort of in that importance. So what's important in respect of health and wellbeing services? So access to health and wellbeing services, obviously top, over 90% of that is for our respondents. Supporting older people and vulnerable residents. Down the bottom is tackling obesity. That kind of goes against a lot of the statistical information that we're getting through, in saying that actually that's one area that we should be tackling as a district, and that is what's coming through from our Live Well data at the moment. But again, the notable difference is the younger age groups are good. They want to be able to sort of like help supporting the older residents and vulnerable residents. Mental health came out quite high for them, and obviously having a diverse range of leisure activities as well. So even that features lower down, that's just reflective of the dynamic of the age ranges that we have in the responses, but that is what's coming out as what's important to them. And for Housestead people, you know, it was really key that they wanted to help people lead healthy lifestyles. So moving on to what's important in respect of the economy, there were some quite close ones in respect of this one. So thriving town centres where people can socialise, encouraging new business into the districts, and growing local employment opportunities were the top ones. But they are all really quite close in their responses. Apart from improving the visitor experience, has come quite low, but that's maybe where we need to sort of like improve our sort of cultural and arts offering within the district. The notable differences, the 18 to 44s, obviously looking at improving engagement and support to existing businesses. We did see quite an increase in people starting up their own businesses in the younger age group, so that's obviously where it's quite pertinent to them. For the older age group, so the 65 plus, it's about improving the skills to boost employability. That might be around sort of people returning to work. They may have retired and decided they want to have part-time jobs, but they need to have those skills. And if you have a look at the different areas, Housestead and the surrounding areas, about growing those local employment opportunities. And for Witham, it's about encouraging new businesses into the district, which again is another area that we are already looking at and addressing. So we also asked what's important in respect of housing and infrastructure. Top one obviously came out of good transport links, improving congestion on our main roads, having more affordable, sustainable homes are the top sort of three in respect of that one. Again, for the notable differences, the 18 to 44s want to be able to support those who are homeless or at risk of dealing with rough sleeping. It's probably more prevalent in that age group, and that's probably why it's more important to them. And obviously what you think, so for the more rural sort of areas, the Housestead and surrounding areas, for them it's about having good transport links, having the affordable, sustainable homes, and again obviously for them dealing with rough sleeping. The other questions that we asked is sort of like basically what's keeping them awake at night, what is concerning them. And again, they were asked to list as many as they wanted. We weren't restricting them to have, you know, just 5. We just asked them to pick as many areas that they wanted, but then asked them to sort of like back that up in some sort of commentary. So cost of living is still rating quite high. We've got antisocial behaviour, overdevelopment, we've got alcohol and drug-related crime and disorder, and then just sort of general crime that are featuring quite high. So they're the main areas of concerns for our residents that we would have a look at and how we need to address in our sort of like development of areas alongside all of the data and other evidence bases that we'd look at. Again, the notable differences, mental health featured quite heavily for the 18 to 44s, and in the sort of like the living areas for Braintree, cost of living, that's probably notable because that's where we have our deprived areas. And Witham in the surrounding areas, it's sort of like the overdevelopment and again the personal safety, which is sort of resonating through other areas of this consultation. So as I said earlier, this was the first time that we've actually included any questions around finances, and we wanted to know whether or not people agreed or disagreed with 10 statements that we put out there, which basically you can split them into sort of like budget saving strategies or generating income. So these are the budget saving ones we have, so sort of like using technology to help us with the delivery of our services, making sure people can help them inform themselves, so we've got less reliance on our publicly funded services. Partnership working, encouraging local people and communities to deliver services, reducing spend on services that council are not legally required to provide, and obviously reducing spend on frontline services. So you can see there what people agreed with and then what people really disagreed with. So they're quite happy for us to sort of like look at using digital technology, working in partnership and getting people to self-serve more, but they don't want us to reduce any spend on frontline services. That is what is really important to our people. That is the services that they value, and that's what we kind of need to address when we're looking at our budgets. The next one, as I said, is where we can look at on our income generating strategies. So obviously using our council buildings and council land to help us to generate income, looking at generating incomes on our spend on our services, so increasing council tax, wasn't a very popular one, and generating income from fees and charges, and then obviously looking at introducing charges for services that are currently free or subsidised. So as you can see there, they're quite happy for us to go out and generate more income using our council buildings and council land, but they're quite objective. They don't like the thoughts of actually us increasing anything that's going to impact on them having to spend out more money. So again, considerations when we're looking at our budget setting. So that's the feedback on, like I say, it's quite high level, haven't gone into as much detail around the breakdown of the age groups as I'd like to, or comparing with our previous corporate strategy consultation results that we had 4 years ago. We will be going into a little bit more detail around that at the members' evening next week, and it will give you an opportunity as well to sort of give your thoughts over what's important to you in respect of your areas that you look after and what your constituents are feeding back to you. So just taking you through the timeline now. So we've got, like I said, the members' evening next week. We've also got strategy workshop 2 days after that, where members will be looking at the feedback that we've had so far and the evidence bases that we've got so far. In November, we will be drafting our themes and priorities and then going out for stakeholder engagement, because obviously it's important we get their feedback just as much as we get everybody else's, because they're going to be the partners that we're working with to deliver on our actions for our priorities. There is a slight amendment to this. We will also be having the next Corporate Policy Committee at the end of November, so the date has changed now to the 30th of November, so that will move up into that timeline. And at that stage, you will receive what that draft, statement on a page looks like around sort of what our draft themes and priorities look like. And it's your opportunity as well to sort of like feed into have we got them right. So you are also a key stakeholder in this process, so it's your opportunity to feedback on our draft themes and our draft priorities that we will have. Also in December, we will be engaging again with our corporate management team and making sure that what we're saying, they are happy with being able to deliver. And we will obviously amend any of this following any feedback that we receive from the stakeholder feedback and member feedback, to then produce our final draft in January, and then again we'll be engaged with the corporate management team and JET at that stage before we then start looking at the cabinet process, which will start in February. That's when we have the draft papers going to management board and JET, feeding into that cabinet process in March, where they'll make recommendations to full council to agree the corporate strategy, and then we'll be publishing that strategy from the 1st of April when it comes into effect. And that's the end of the presentation. So happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Tracy. If I can use your microphone. So do members have any questions for Tracy or Dan? Councillor Edwards.
Slightly boring question. Sorry. Can we get those slides?
Yes.
Thank you. That was actually very interesting. Really interesting to see the stats from across the district. Actually, one question I did have: do you know what the breakdown is between rural and urban residents in terms of percentage?
We do. Yes. We have that within the census information.
Oh, okay.
I think I'm saying that. I'm pretty sure we do, but yeah, we can have a look at. It'll be within the ward profiles anyway, so we'll be able to disseminate that information out.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Thanks.
Councillor Rajiv.
Thank you. I had a question about the empty properties. So when we are saying empty properties, are they properties bought by people and they don't live there, or are they unsold properties?
It's a combination of things, really. It could be that they have bought the property to do it up and just haven't got round to it. It could be that it's a property that they've owned and moved out of and haven't sold. It could be a property that, unfortunately, the resident died and it's going through probate. There are a number of reasons for empty properties. It could be a second home, which they then are not living in. But we do have an empty homes officer that is looking at the reasons behind all of the empty properties and then working with people around. It could just be that they're not at a living standard, and we need to obviously work with them around sort of being able to bring that property back up to a standard that it can be then lived in, and then looking at opportunities to then help us with our housing issue and bring that out to, become one of our landlords, so to speak, as well. So there are a multitude of reasons behind the empty properties.
Thank you. But when we find the reason, it'll help us in housing people who have been waiting for ages, isn't it?
Yeah, that's the aim of looking at, the empty properties.
Thank you.
Councillor Finken.
Yes, I was a bit concerned about the disconnect between your earlier slides, which were talking about the status of various things in the district, and then the consultation process. Obviously, you were trying to mitigate the fact that the vast majority of the people who replied were elderly by identifying from the small number who answered, only 1% from 18 to 24 from the younger age groups. But if it was an opinion poll, it would be considered to be unsatisfactory, wouldn't it? There should be far more of an attempt to get a reasonable balance of different ages. And in conjunction with that, I would say that there isn't going to be much response from the areas which are most deprived in the district. You said that there were 3 wards. In fact, there are 4 wards because 2 were joint third. So there are 4 wards which are among the 20% of wards most deprived in the country. And I would guess that very few of them, the people living in those wards, would have responded to this consultation. And therefore, it's not perhaps getting the attention that it needs in the strategy. Now, we recently had a levelling up evening, a members' evening, which was rather unsatisfactory in my view. And quite a number of points were made during and after that meeting with officers. And I just wondered how far they would be given due weight in the development of the corporate strategy in comparison with the responses to the consultation process. Thank you.
So we look at, as I said earlier, there's a multitude of evidence that we look at. So it's not just going to be sort of like feedback, and we are aware that we did have a very low response rate from the lower age groups. They are a very, very hard group to engage with. We have tried a lot of things, and even Essex County Council, who we've been consulting with over the analysis of the results, say that they struggle as well with their Essex resident surveys around engaging with that younger age group. So that is a piece of work that we need to look at and develop and improve on. We will take into account feedback from, the levelling up meetings that have been taking place. So they have been holding workshops with residents as well, so we can take all of that into account. That is evidence that we need to look at. That's feedback from different groups of people that we will certainly take into account when we're developing this, but it also needs to sort of fit with what the evidence base is telling us around sort of like our health profile, for example, and any other sort of like the economic profile that we've got and any other sort of district statistics that we have. It's like that triangulation really. So it's making sure that we're not just listening to one area, we are backing that up with other areas as well. So if we hear it once, we all sort of like go, yeah, okay, we understand that area. But then if our evidence is telling us that as well, then we might want to test the waters a little bit by looking in other areas and asking other questions and looking at other strategies, speaking to our partners, engaging with our partners and what they're seeing. And again, like I say, you know, this is one of the reasons why we've got the member evening next week. That is your opportunity to feed back as to what your constituents are saying within your area. So the representations from those most deprived areas will be taken on board what they are saying is most important to them in their wards. So that will, you know, feature largely as well in that feedback session and taking that into account.
Councillor Finkel.
Sorry to come back. Yes, I've got a different area, and that's the devolution agenda. Now, obviously, that's been touched on slightly, but that could make a major difference to how we work as a district council. And also how I looked at the previous corporate strategy 2020 to 2024, and there was very little mention of working with parish and town councils or of how the district council worked collaboratively with the county council. And one of the biggest complaints that people in this area make is the number of different levels of council. And of course, if you add in the devolution proposals, there could be an additional level, which could make it even more difficult. So I think the corporate strategy ought to really devote some attention to the complexity of that issue and how it's going to be addressed by the district council for the benefit of residents.
Yeah, absolutely. We will, you know, we'll have themes within our corporate strategy, but underlying under all of that is how we're going to be delivering out, and that will involve sort of like our partnership working. It will have to touch on devolution. It will have to touch on how we're going to be sharing services. All of that aspect. I don't know if Danny wants to add anything around the devolution.
Yeah, happy to. Thanks, Councillor Finkin. And I think you're absolutely right. You know, this is the changing nature of the way we're working. There is on the table, hopefully, an opportunity for a level 2 devolution deal for Greater Essex. Within that, we're hopeful that the work that Braintree is really driving, working with our partners across North Essex, will play a key role in ensuring that there's representation from districts, that we can help any new combined authority understand and value the importance of issues and the evidence base that we've got in Braintree and across North Essex. And so the work that we've got already through things like the North Essex Economic Board, which has got a key priority, as you'd expect in its new strategy, around skills. You know, there's a real opportunity there to directly influence a potential devolution of the adult education budget across Essex. So whilst it could be seen as more complex, and perhaps it is, it will actually give us greater leverage and opportunity to understand how those priorities can be influenced so we can get better outcomes. So, yeah, I think Tracy's right. It's got to be a part of the delivery.
Else has a question. I have a question. Tracy, when the strategy is published in March, are we then dissolved as a committee? Or do we carry on developing?
I don't think the committee is just about this strategy, is it? So, no, I wouldn't say you'd be dissolved as such.
Will we continue sort of inputting into this as it? Because when we talked about it, we said it's a sort of work in progress, as a living strategy. I mean, it hasn't. The last one, the last four-year strategy was published and didn't change, did it? Despite the environment changing quite dramatically.
It changed slightly. We did a review after a couple of years. It went to JET and we changed it slightly. I can't remember whether it went to Cabinet or not. It was 2 years ago now. Yep. But there were some slight changes to the wording to sort of take into account sort of like being the word sustainability, for example.
Yes, you mentioned that.
Yeah. I guess, yes, we probably should build in a review at some stage to make sure that it is still relevant, because it is going over 4 years. We are, like we said, it's quite volatile at the moment. We've been used to having that stable, you know, environment, and we haven't got that at the moment. So yes, I'm quite happy to build in a review, but they will be quite high level, and it'll be more around the action. So we've been lucky in the last 4 years that the themes that we developed prior to COVID were still relevant and during COVID. So we had, for example, supporting our communities as a theme, and priority was around sort of like making sure that our communities were able to like support each other, and we were like supporting them, and then so that enabled us to still have that action around bringing in the £1 million new homes bonus to deliver, under the cost of living, because that still fitted within the theme that we had and the priorities that we'd already developed 4 years prior. So although we didn't have that insight and that, we weren't able to know where we were, and I don't think we would have believed it had we have been able to have had that insight. We were still able to sort of like develop that action, and it still fitted within the theme of our corporate strategy. And the same with sort of like the promoting prosperity element. There was something around sort of, supporting businesses and being able to sort of like produce those skills. So those supporting businesses really fitted in well with the recovery for COVID, because we were able to sort of like help our high streets recover, and that still fitted in well with the themes and the priorities that we had already developed. So there wasn't a requirement for too much change, but it was an area that we did keep an eye on, and we sort of like added in elements around sort of climate and things.
Do we have any statistics on how many of our electors or voters or constituents have actually read the corporate strategy? I mean, just out of curiosity.
Unfortunately not, no.
It's probably quite weird, isn't it? Yeah.
Depends how it's been distributed, doesn't it, really?
Yes.
So if we could see how many people are looking at it on our own website, but if it's being put out there in other guises, then we're not going to know what that reach is. So.
Dan, you were twitching.
Thanks, Chairman. Yeah, I mean, I think it could be, if the committee agreed, a legitimate recommendation to consider as part of your blossoming ongoing work programme, that you might come back and review the corporate strategy at a point in time, and Cabinet could consider whether that's something that they would want to see. I think that would be a good suggestion. I think as for for me, it's less about the readership of the corporate strategy and more about actually, is the strategy delivering the sorts of things that are important based on the evidence base that we've got, that Tracy set out, and what we understand from the various mechanisms that we consult and engage with communities. So yeah, but we do a lot of our communications through the year will reflect back very strongly to the corporate strategy themes. And indeed, I would also add, I mean, Tracy, I think you mentioned that every year there is an annual plan process, which feeds into the service planning process as well. So there's a direct sort of golden thread through from the corporate strategy over a 4-year period to the annual planning cycle of the council and the work that we're doing. So, yeah.
Any other questions? Councillor Taylor.
Yeah, just if there are any legislative changes or new pieces of legislation that might contradict or trigger some alteration to the corporate strategy, will you inform members either through this committee, Cabinet, or just consult, or just inform members in a round-robin email, just so we can keep track of those changes or problems?
Yes, we could bring that back to this committee, or depends, I guess, on what the changes are. If it's very light touch, then we could just do a round robin, like you say. But if it's something fundamental, then yes, I think we need to bring it back to the committee.
And I guess the one that probably springs to mind is the Environment Act. I'm not sure the government have resolved it yet, but think about things like charges for garden waste. I'm not sure that has been answered. So if there was a directive, if there was a change, it would be a statutory. Is it a statutory instrument to amend that legislation, or is it fresh? I'm not up to speed with the Environment Act per se, but if such a change was brought in, how would we be notified and consulted?
I think Emma's going to.
It really does depend on what the change is. If the legislation is changed such a way that it's where we have no discretion, then it will you'll be notified through policy. Unfortunately, the way that legislation evolves, we would be communicating with you on a regular basis, bombarding you with changes, things. So normally, where there is a fundamental change to the way that local government has to operate due to a change in law, then our policies are naturally updated, because if we can't depart from it, we can't depart from it. Where there is a local choice, then that's when officers will do a piece of work examining the council's existing policies and procedures, and then take that through the appropriate decision-making channels at the time. And obviously all members can have access to those committee papers. If it's a matter that goes to full council that requires adoption, members will have the opportunity to participate in that vote, debate and have access to the papers. Even if it sits with Cabinet, those papers are available to members by the fact they are published on the council's website. So I wouldn't like to say, as one of the in-house lawyers, that we would send you emails setting out what the legal framework change is, because sometimes we can't distill it down to something, that snapshot. But where we are aware there's significant changes, we reflect on those on our policies and strategies, and then we take that through a piece of work, and then members are notified through that channel.
Has anyone got any further questions?
Yeah.
Yes. Councillor Finkel.
I'm just responding to Councillor Taylor. If there is a change of government, there could be quite radical changes in policies on planning, housing and all sorts of other things, devolution and so on. And that might require quite a radical change in our corporate strategy. So we might need to be looking at it again, next year or the beginning of the year after.
Well, we are going to think about whether we have any recommendations to make, so maybe we should.
Chairman, if I just also add, we do have officers who are horizon scanning all the time for things that are coming forward, and if they, if we do have a change in the political landscape, national, as we've had previously, there's a time where we have to pause and think about what that means. Obviously, the legal frameworks continue until governments are formed, but where there is certain matters which we feel are going to be pushed through if there's a change of government, then we naturally do take that pause, because we're in a time where a project can be paused, then we have to take that decision in a timely way. So, please be assured that if there is any fundamental changes on the horizon, there are a number of officers involved looking at those. There's always conversations that have been happening in this organisation, be it at management board level or with the administration and with the horizon scanning officers. So we are very rarely taken on the back foot where there is a change, and those will be communicated through where they can be.
Any further questions? Thank you, members. If there are no further questions, we've been asked to consider the contents of the presentation and whether we wish to submit any recommendations for consideration in the finalisation of the Corporate Strategy 2024-28. Are there any such recommendations members wish to make? I suppose we don't really need to recommend that we'd like it reviewed, because we basically established that it will be reviewed and checked up on with the annual plan and everything. Anyway, okay. Thank you, members.
Chair, what we would like is for the presentation and so on to be accepted, and for the questions that have been made to be taken into account in any final proposals. That's what I would move.
Okay. That seems a perfectly reasonable thing to move.
Chairman, as you've had a motion put forward by Councillor Finkel, we do need a seconder, and then that to be taken to the vote.
Would anyone like to second that proposal? Great. Thank you. So we can register that as...
Chairman, you need to put to the vote, so if you'd like to ask your colleagues to indicate if they're in favour of the motion.
Members, are you in favour of that motion? I suppose I am too.
Chairman, that's unanimous, so you don't need to proceed any further.
Okay.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. I take it that the report has been considered and noted on that basis. Thank you, members. The report has been noted. Thank you once again, Tracy, for your presentation, and to both you and Dan for your attendance this evening. We're very grateful. You are both more than welcome to stay for the remainder of the meeting if you'd like, but please feel free to leave. Before we end this item, please can I remind members that we also have a members' evening next week on this matter, which I would urge you to attend, as this will further our understanding for the next session of the corporate strategy, scheduled for our next meeting, which is on the 30th of November. Is that right? When is our next meeting?
Next week.
No, when it says scheduled for our next meeting in November.
30th.
Yeah, which is the 30th, yeah. And that's a change from the 30th, yeah, which I think everybody knows about. Agenda item 6, programme of works. Members, the report for this item is set out on pages 8 to 10 of the agenda. The report provides members with a summary of the committee's initial work programme for 2023-24, which was recently agreed at the Cabinet meeting on the 25th of September. As part of our initial programme of works, the committee will be engaged in the Council's review of the corporate strategy 2024-28 and the household waste and collection policy. A copy of the work programme is provided at Appendix 1 to the agenda. Do members have any comments to make in respect to the initial work programme? Please note that this is a live document and will be subject to review throughout the year. Does anyone have any comments? Thank you, members. We are asked to agree the draft work programme for the committee as attached at Appendix 1. Please can I take it that this has been agreed? I think I need a show of hands, don't I? Great. Thank you, members. The work programme has been agreed. Agenda item 7, urgent business and close of meeting. Members, we do not have any urgent items for this evening's meeting, so this concludes our business for this evening. Please note that the next scheduled meeting of the committee is an additional meeting due to be held next Thursday, 19th of October, starting at the usual time of 7:15 p.m. The meeting will be used to review the emerging household waste and collections policy in line with the committee's agreed work programme. I will therefore close this meeting of the Corporate Policy Development Committee at 12 minutes past 8. I would like to thank all those who have watched this meeting online and those seated in the public gallery. Thank you for your attendance and have a good evening.